All right, Doston, welcome back to Crypto Brain. And before we begin today's breakdown, I want you to completely clear your mind because what you are about to hear sounds less like a normal crypto story and more like the beginning of a future geopolitical thriller. Because right now, across underground crypto forums, private military technology discussions, and hidden online communities, one phrase has started spreading at an alarming speed. US military confirms Toshi coin role in national. And Doston, the moment this phrase started circulating across the internet, the entire atmosphere around Toshi changed instantly because suddenly people stopped looking at it as just another meme coin and started asking a much more dangerous question: what if Toshi is connected to something far bigger than retail trading? What if this is not simply about profit speculation or hype, but about the future structure of digital warfare itself? Now, before we go any further, let's make one thing absolutely clear. There is no official public statement confirming that the United States military has formally adopted or endorsed Toshi, and that distinction matters enormously. However, what has triggered this intrusion of speculation is the growing discussion around military interest in blockchain infrastructure, decentralized systems, and cyber resilience technologies, because over the last several years, governments around the world, including the United States, China, and Russia, have all dramatically increased their focus on digital warfare, cybersecurity, and blockchain-based operational systems. And that alone has completely changed how investors interpret certain crypto narratives. And this is where the psychology surrounding Toshi becomes extremely fascinating, because investors are beginning to realize that the future battlefield may look completely different from traditional warfare, because modern conflicts are no longer limited to tanks, missiles, and fighter jets. They are increasingly moving towards cyber attacks, infrastructure disruption, data control, artificial intelligence, and decentralized communication systems, and according to many analysts, whichever nation controls the strongest digital infrastructure in the future could potentially control global strategic influence itself. Now think carefully about this, because historically almost every major world-changing technology initially emerged from military or strategic research environments. The internet itself began as a military communication project. GPS technology originally came from defense systems, and even modern cybersecurity frameworks were developed primarily for national security operations (RST) before entering civilian use. And this exact historical pattern is what has caused many crypto analysts to start asking whether blockchain technology could eventually follow a similar path. And Doston, this is precisely why the Toshi narrative has become so explosive, because once people started discussing the possibility that decentralized blockchain ecosystems may play a role in future cyber infrastructure, the market immediately began searching for projects that could potentially align with that direction, and suddenly Toshi started appearing repeatedly inside those conversations, not because of confirmed military adoption, but because of the characteristics investors are now associating with future digital resilience, decentralization, community-driven infrastructure, and rapidly expanding network participation. Now, whether those theories are accurate remains highly speculative, but one thing is undeniable: perception itself moves markets, and right now. Now, the perception surrounding Toshi is evolving at extraordinary speed, because the moment national security language becomes key, connected to any digital asset, investors immediately stop viewing it as a joke and start evaluating it through an entirely different psychological lens, because military interest implies strategic value, and strategic value implies long-term importance. And Doston, perhaps the most dangerous part of this entire narrative is the timing, because the world is already entering a period of escalating cyber tension where governments increasingly fear digital infrastructure, attacks, banking disruptions, communication blackouts, and AI-powered cyber warfare. In that environment, decentralized systems suddenly become much more attractive, because centralized systems contain single points of failure, while decentralized networks are designed specifically to survive disruption. And this exact concept is why blockchain technology continues attracting institutional and governmental attention globally. Now let's bring this back specifically to Toshi, because many viewers are asking why this coin in particular, why not thousands of other projects? And the answer lies in narrative velocity combined double. Its ecosystem growth, because Toshi has rapidly become one of the most recognizable community-driven assets inside the Base ecosystem. And Base itself continues attracting enormous attention due to its Coinbase connections, scalability advantages, and growing developer activity. And whenever an ecosystem begins expanding aggressively, certain assets inside that ecosystem naturally become speculative symbols representing the broader network momentum. But what makes Toshi especially interesting is not just its price movement, it is the speed at which. Chit's community psychology is evolving because markets today are driven less by pure technology and more by attention influence and collective belief, and right now Toshi is beginning to generate exactly the kind of emotionally charged narrative that historically creates explosive market behavior. Because once investors begin believing a project could potentially connect to larger macro trends, whether technological, political, or strategic, liquidity tends to accelerate rapidly. And this is where whale activity becomes critically important. Beak. Aussie, according to several on-chain analysts, unusual accumulation patterns have reportedly appeared around Toshi during recent consolidation phases, where larger wallets appeared to be positioning quietly while broader retail attention remained relatively divided, and experienced traders that this type of behavior often appears before stronger momentum cycles because sophisticated capital rarely enters emotionally, it enters strategically during uncertainty before narratives become mainstream. Now, another reason the current speculation has intensified is because military and intelligence agencies globally are already known to be studying blockchain monitoring systems, crypto transaction analysis, and decentralized infrastructure security. And once that information became publicly discussed online, many investors automatically began connecting those broader developments to aggressively growing ecosystems like Toshi, and whether justified or not, that connectional one has dramatically amplified the psychological intensity surrounding the project. And Doston's psychology in crypto is everything because markets do not move purely on confirmed facts. They move on expectation, fear, excitement, and collective imagination. And right now, the imagination surrounding Toshi is becoming increasingly extreme because people are no longer asking whether it is simply another meme coin. They are asking whether it represents part of a much larger digital transformation story connected to cyber resilience, future finance, and decentralized infrastructure. Now let's talk about the most important concept here, fear of missing out. Because throughout crypto history, the largest wealth creation cycles have always emerged from narratives that initially sounded absurd. Bitcoin was mocked, Ethereum was dismissed, Dogecoin was treated like a joke, and yet every single one of those projects eventually became globally recognized digital assets because communities believed in the narrative before traditional institutions fully understood it. And now many Toshi supporters believe they may be witnessing another early-stage perception shift happening in real time. At the same time, experienced analysts remain cautious because there is a massive difference between speculation and confirmation, and markets driven entirely by emotional hype can become extremely volatile very quickly. Which is why professional traders focus not just on headlines but on liquidity structure, wallet behavior, participation growth, and ecosystem expansion, because sustainable momentum requires more than excitement. It requires persistent capital inflow and long-term narrative strength. However, what cannot be ignored is the scale of attention Toshi is now attracting because social engagement surrounding the project continues rising. Online search trends have accelerated dramatically, and discussions connecting blockchain technology with national security frameworks continue expanding across multiple online communities. And once a market narrative reaches that stage, price volatility usually follows, because attention itself becomes a financial catalyst. And perhaps the most psychologically powerful element of this entire story is uncertainty, because uncertainty creates obsess. Some people become fascinated by the possibility that hidden developments may already be occurring behind the scenes, and whether true or false, that emotional tension keeps drawing more attention toward the asset itself. And in modern crypto markets, attention is often the single most valuable resource any project can possess. So right now, the world is watching Toshi from a completely different perspective than before, because the conversation has evolved from simple meme speculation into discussions involving cyber warfare, digital sovereignty, naturalized infrastructure, and future financial resilience, and that shift alone is enough to transform how investors evaluate the project moving forward. Now, whether any direct national security connection to Toshi actually exists remains entirely unverified, but the narrative itself has already changed market psychology dramatically. Because once people begin imagining a project as part of the future digital order, they stop treating it like ordinary speculation and start treating it like a possible long-term strategic opportunity. And this is why the coming months could become extremely important, because if broader blockchain adoption continues accelerating globally and decentralized infrastructure becomes increasingly important to governments, institutions, and cyber defense systems, then projects capable of capturing massive online communities and ecosystem Momentum may experience extraordinary market attention. So for now, watch the liquidity, watch the ecosystem expansion, watch the whale wallets, and most importantly, watch the psychology, because crypto markets have rewarded the investors who recognized emerging narratives before the majority even understood what was happening. And right now, whether this turns out to be the beginning of a revolutionary shift, or simply one of the most powerful speculative narratives of the cycle, nothing is undeniable. Toshi is no longer being discussed like an ordinary meme coin anymore. And perhaps that alone is what has the markets so deeply unsettled. This is Crypto Brain. Stay alert, stay analytical, and remember, the biggest market moves often begin at the exact moment the world still believes nothing serious is happening.